Check. Good evening, friends. Good evening. If you'll find a spot, we'll get started. It feels like it's been forever since we've had a neighborhood meeting in person, doesn't it? And here we are. We get to do it again. Second time. Good evening and welcome. My name is Jeremy Gertis. I am the pastor here at the church, but also the president of the Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association. The Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association and our friends across the street in the Prospect Park Neighborhood Association thought it would be a good thing to bring our city council members, our city council candidates, and our school board candidates together to have a quick forum in advance of this year's local elections to help make sure that all of our neighbors are able to vote responsibly and intelligently. And so we want to welcome you this evening to our little shindig here. And we're going to start tonight with our city council candidates, and then we're going to move into our school board candidates. Before we do that, though, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of the rules of our little discussion tonight. Basically, what we're going to do is each candidate is going to have 5 minutes to introduce themselves, to identify any issues that they see in our community, and to explain how they think that they would address them if they are elected to the body that they're supposed to be going for, right? So that's the first step. And then after everybody has had a chance to do that, we will move into a time of question and answers. I have a sheet here with questions. And you guys, the candidates, get to answer the questions. So we will pose the questions. Nobody has seen these except for myself and one other person. And he's not even here tonight. So it's top secret. Makes it exciting, doesn't it? Anybody sweating? Any candidates sweating now because of that? They're all like, oh no. Bill Gray's over here like, I hope he doesn't ask me. All right, okay. So I'm going to invite our city council candidates to come and join me on the platform. There is 5 seats. We should have 5 candidates this evening, and come on up and grab yourself a spot. These are the candidates from Ward 1 and the at-large races. So come on up, join us. He's going the wrong way. On your microphone, you will find an on-off switch. I trust that you can figure out how to work that. We don't want any live mic incidents tonight, so please.
It's on. This is on.
It should be on, yes.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh, excuse me. Excellent. There should be a green light that flashes on the wireless ones, and the wired one is just on and off.
Yeah, test.
Yep. Everybody good? Okay. We're going to start. Bill, which direction should we start on? Left or right?
Let's go left.
Left. We're going to start on the left. So introduce yourself and we'll just walk across here. The 5 minutes starts now.
Great. I actually did not expect to go first, so this is awesome. I'm Marcus Kanan, running for Ward 1. I'm currently the president of the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association, so congratulations on being back in person. We haven't made that leap yet. My background is in transportation planning. I have a master's degree in urban and regional planning, so I have a pretty good understanding of how cities work and how money flows into the city to get projects done. My vision for the city really is how we can move forward to make our city successful, and for me that kind of builds around these 4 S's in my mind. The first one is safe streets. As I mentioned, I'm a transportation planner, so safe streets are important to me, making sure that streets are walkable, bikeable, that we have good transit, and that auto drivers also are not creating a dangerous situation. So that's kind of the first one for me. The second one is strong neighborhoods. I mentioned I was, Beaverdale Neighborhood Association president, so I do believe that having strong neighborhood associations really helps build the connections that we need to make our city successful. The third S is a smarter government. I believe that we need to have data-driven decision making. I have a background with data, so I believe that we can use that as a powerful tool to help drive decisions and understand how city policies are functioning or not functioning well in our city. I also want to look at our city budget in depth, the whole budget, not just one department or unit, and really make sure that we have the connections between the dollars that we're spending and the goals that we have for our city, and really highlight key outcomes that we expect year over year. The last S, sustainability. I think our city has made good strides towards sustainable goals. We have a 24/7 sustainability initiative to get off coal, but I think we need more action to actually implement infrastructure that will help us reduce our carbon footprint in our city. And for me, those are 2 things. The first is electric vehicle charging. Electric vehicles are coming. They're going to be a larger portion of our fleet of vehicles, and I think we need to make sure that we have infrastructure throughout the city so that when they arrive, everyone has the opportunity to use charging facilities throughout the city. And the second one is a solar initiative that I would like to start. It's a community solar program where individuals throughout the city could buy into this program and receive reduced rates on their utility costs. So, Jeremy, I don't know if there's a timer you have going on. Oh, that's perfect. I'll just wrap it up there. We're about 12 days to the election, so I look forward to the question and answer period. And if you're looking for new leadership and you think that data is important, I would say vote for me.
All right. My name is Indira Shoemaker. I am born and raised here in Ward 1, graduated from Hoover High School down the road in 2012. So this is, very much like my neighborhood. It's where I grew up, played down the street with my friends, all this stuff. So I'm very, happy to be here, very comfortable. And I'm really excited to start having conversations with all of you tonight. A little background about me is my first job I had at Franklin Avenue Library when I was 16 years old. That was my favorite job for a long time until I got a job in the Parks and Recreation Department, and then that was my favorite job. I worked at Grays Lake, I worked at Birdland Marina, I worked at some of the splash pads, and I spent a lot of time in the community centers on the east side and on the southeast side. And so that was like a really eye-opening experience for me. I got to kind of see how my government works at the employee level, which I think is a really unique perspective to have. And I have worked other jobs as well, pretty much like, working class jobs, service industry jobs, things like that. So I, grew up okay, but not great. And our financial situation in our family is just kind of, hasn't gotten any better, and things have gotten more expensive and things like that. And so I have really seen what it's like to struggle in this city and in this community and in this ward while still loving the place that I live so much that I'm willing to fight for it. In 2020, when the protests started here in Des Moines, I'll be honest, I didn't think anything was going to happen here. I had seen, in 2014 when things were happening in Ferguson, that, people showed up at the courthouse with signs and then took pictures and went home. And so that's kind of what I expected to happen here. But when I actually saw that a big movement was happening here in my home city, I knew that something was finally going to change here. I started showing up to protests, and people who wanted us to, not be on the streets and work through the system said go to city council meetings, and so I did. I went to my first city council meeting on June 8th, and I spoke about the racial profiling ordinance that the city had proposed. And I was, shocked and surprised, like a lot of people, I think, that we didn't have a ban on racial profiling in our police department in Des Moines in 2020. And I realized very quickly at my first city council meeting that the city council is not set up to listen to its constituents. There are a few people who have access to our city councilors, and the rest of us don't. And when we speak up at city council meetings, they've already made their minds up. They're not really here to listen to the people. When we have public speaking, they're not really considering what we have to say and taking a step back and saying, I'm gonna reconsider and I'm gonna, go back and change this thing based on what the people have said. And so I realized the Ward 1 race was open that night, and my sister, who's in the back over there, said, you should run. And I said, you know what, sure, I will. So I spent the next few months trying to look for a way that I can create infrastructure in our city that guarantees that the people have a voice in government, not just hoping to get a phone call back, not having to do all the work on the grassroots side of like pushing and pushing and pushing while the city is pushing back to get things that you need, but really find infrastructure. And I discovered the idea of people's assemblies or people's councils, and that was really what pushed me to announce in February that I was going to run for the seat because I had a plan. So the Ward 1 People's Council is what I'm really pushing with this campaign, and that would be an assembly of the people. It wouldn't be restricted to anybody, but just people would come together in their neighborhoods, on their blocks, with the people that they know, and make decisions about what's happening in their lives and in their neighborhoods. So you don't just have 7 people sitting up there trying to represent 200,000. It's people really get to make the decisions about what happens in their life. And so that is the main thing that I am running on, is power to the people, bringing power back to the people of Des Moines so that we can make those decisions. And everything on my platform is really centered around that idea. So strong communities make police obsolete is the first platform point that I have. And what that means is that we have a public safety system right now that isn't equitable for everybody in the city. That is only reactive, and that's only tool to solve social ills is violence. And what I want to do is build up community-based public safety systems that are born in the community, that are people that know the people around them, and is focused on restorative and transformative justice. And so that means prioritizing the victim's needs, prioritizing keeping families together and communities together, not trying to add further trauma in reaction to harm being done. And that also means preventative measures, making sure that people have the resources they need so they're not in a position where they're going to be doing things that are going to harm their neighbors, their neighborhood, their society. That means just really taking care of the people around us.
And that's
I have
time.
a lot more on my platform, but I would love to answer any questions that you have. If you need any literature, we have some in the back as well. So if you can check that out.
At this point, I'm going to actually skip ahead to Bill, because Bill is running also for Ward 1. So we'll keep the Ward 1 people together, and then we'll do the at-large. Is that okay with you? Okay. Very good. All right, sir, you're up.
Thank you. For a little background, my name is Bill Gray. I was born and raised right here in Des Moines, the oldest of 8 kids. I grew up in a little 2-bedroom house on the east side. I graduated from Dowling High School in 1970, the University of Iowa in 1975. That summer I met my wife Ann, and we got married the next year in 1976 and settled in Beaverdale and been there ever since. I started a 41-year career in telecommunications with Northwestern Bell and AT&T, and retired in 2018. In 2001, I got an appointment to the city's Zoning Board of Adjustment, and I remained on that for 13 years, the last 9 as chairman. That gave me a unique view of what was going on in our city, the players that were going on, the kind of personnel that we need, and the kind of exemptions and variances we needed to take care of for our citizens so that we can keep people that wanted to come and live here. This is the most important thing to me. I want people to enjoy living here. I want people to look at Des Moines as a first choice in a place where they want to settle down. Now, when I ran in 2013, much of the same reason that I ran then is applicable now. I want to make sure that we take care of our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods are key to us moving forward as a city. So if you look at the 3 things that I focus on, the first one is infrastructure. And I think you've seen the kind of work we've been putting into this. The floods of 2018 brought it really to the forefront. We were remarkably slow in getting our infrastructure put into place. We had probably a 25-year plan that we had to compress, because when you're driving around after that flood and you're seeing people's prized possessions, their belongings on the curb completely ruined, and we could have done something better about it, then it became to the forefront to me that I got to get some things done. So infrastructure, what have we gotten done? Over on 47th and Holcomb, we put $7 million into putting in an underground retention basin so that that 31 acres that all drains right there at that point will have an opportunity to get downstream a heck of a lot easier. We put another $7 million in that Macokota drain there on just east of 41st Street so that it can handle the increased flow there. If you look to the west over there in 41st and College, you're going to see a huge $2.2 million retention basin that we're putting in so that we can get the flow. If the flow of water is too excessive, it can pool there for a while and not flood the neighborhood. Now we're presently working on 34th Street, east of 34th Street, to widen that sewer line there. We're coming back across into the Whitmer Ravine and going across over into Beaver, where we're going to widen the culverts and put more culverts in there. We're going to get this water drained out of here and keep our citizens dry. That's a first sense of infrastructure. Second thing are our roads. Our roads are deplorable. We had a system in the past where we would patch. We'd just do a 3-inch overlay and call it good, and we'd be back in 5 years. We've changed that. We started making our infrastructure on roads a lot more durable, and we don't want to touch them for another 15 to 20 years. So you're going to see a lot more, in terms of getting things done. To give you some examples, the Beaverdale streetscape is one that we got done. We not only did the sewer, but we did the street there. Same thing with the 6th Avenue corridor. We got the sewers done there, and we're going to get the street completely done all the way from the River Bridge to University. Our next big project is the 2nd Avenue reconstruction. Again, taking care of the sewers and reconstruct the road that hasn't been touched in 100 years. So that's the infrastructure plans that I've got. Next thing is our parks. Our parks are the one thing that brings all of our community together. We have not put enough money back into our parks and made it tough. I've had calls from people saying, grass isn't mowed, playground equipment's falling apart. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you, we went through the park system. Evelyn K. Davis Park. We put a mini pitch system in there. We put lights out there on the basketball courts so kids can go and play basketball leagues at night. We put brand new playground equipment in there. We put new trees in there. At Tower Park, we tore out the wading pool, put a splash pad in that's been tremendously successful, and put a restroom in there. Whitmer Park, we put pretty much $1.5 million into that. We dredged the pond. We put a walking trail around there. We're in the process of putting in a restroom facility and playground equipment for that. At Bates Park, we put a splash pad that's getting used unbelievably. Ashland, we put a walking trail in there, and we got all that.
And that's time.
One more thing, I'll let it go, is the next thing is I'm going to make sure we got proper staffing for our first responders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the middle. Mr. Lewis.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you for hosting this and bringing us all together to be able to share our ideas and who we are. So I am indeed your neighbor. Me and my wife moved here to Lower Beaver about 5 years ago. We live over on Tawana Drive, 3907 Tawana. So feel free to see that whole street filled with my yard signs and supporters. So yeah, me and my wife moved here. Our journey, our marriage started off at a young age. We got married at 21, straight out of Iowa State University. Came back home with, to combine almost $60,000 in debt. We had to move in with my mother-in-law because that American dream wasn't there for us. Luckily, we were able to pay down our student loans and be able to save up enough money to move over to this neighborhood. Now our children are being raised here. They'll be going to Samuelson and then Hoover High School and then Meredith, I believe. So yeah, I'm your neighbor. A little bit about me. I'm 31 years old. I'm a product of East High School. Very proud to be from a public school. From there, I went to Iowa State on the MVP scholarship. The MVP scholarship gives opportunity to people of color who are leaders in their communities to be able to go to school. I was a first-generation student, and I trailblazed for my community and my family. After that, my sister followed and my brother as well. So I came back from college, and again, I was heavily in debt. I started a landscaping business called Lewis Lawn and Labor, and we're still in business now. We have rebranded, and we are an environmental business that does soil restorations, rain gardens, and rain barrels. And what those do are we essentially help homeowners capture water on their properties and be able to treat it, and then whatever's excess runs off to our storm drains. But this helps decrease the amount of water that's going in our storm drains, which the city is doing right now, to make sure that we're not flooding. So if you're in Beaverdale, they're cost sharing at 100%. If you're on the south side, which I know some aren't, they're cost sharing at 75%. So these are environmental work that has impact on our lives. And I've been doing that work since 2014. Last summer, as you have seen, we had marches and protests because a man was murdered. And he looked just like me. And I had the distinct privilege and honor to be able to lead 5,000 residents of Iowa in a march where it brought people of all colors together to talk about the issues and have these deep, passionate discussions about what's wrong and how can we fix it. So after that, I realized I needed to take a stand. I needed to step up. And I announced my candidacy in February for the at-large seat. And why did I do that? Well, one, I believed in myself. I knew that I was a leader through playing football and track and going to college and leading a business that has now done the largest soil restoration in the Midwest for residentials, for residents. And I knew I could transition that knowledge, that skill into city council. If you're familiar with the demographic right now of Des Moines looks like me. Des Moines' my age. And we need people that have that perspective on city council. There are 5 generations, and I'll say it again, 5 generations in the workforce. And there's only 3 generations on city council. That leaves us susceptible to a lot of blind spots, people being misrepresented, underrepresented, and us not interpreting what people need because we don't know them, we don't feel them, we don't live near them. And that's my work that I want to do. I want to go into these communities. I want to cry with mothers who have lost their babies. I want to make sure that the retired population that's being priced out of their home, that their homes are going to be in their name, that no one cannot buy their property taxes and they lose their home, that they can pass what they've worked so hard for to the next generation. Those are the things that I'm going to be mindful of. I will be a progressive candidate. I'll be very vocal, but I'm also going to be here for you, not leading with my own opinions, but leading with what your lived experiences are now. Your government needs to be flexible. Your government needs to be fluid, and it needs to work for you. And the only thing I'm doing here now is wanting to facilitate government for you. So I've announced my candidacy, and I hope I can earn your vote. And if you have any questions, please, please, please reach out. You'll be surprised to know that I don't act like a know-it-all, but I'm willing to do the work to find the answers. I'm willing to do the work. So, thank you. Did I run over?
2, 1.
Okay, sweet. Perfect timing.
It's like he
Just getting
timed it or
nervous.
something. All right, go ahead.
Thank you again for bringing served on the council for my first term for 4 years. A little background, I grew up on the east side. In fact, I grew up on the fairgrounds. I then graduated from East High, went to work at Yonkers for 34 years. They took my job to Milwaukee, and I chose not to go with it. And then went to work for Polk County and ended up retiring from there. In the sidebar, I always called it my vacation, was I opened and created Appalicious at the Iowa State Fair, so I operate 4 Appalicious stands and 2salad bowl stands. So it's not really a great vacation. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's a passion of mine. I am married to Ted Bozen Jr. I took the Beaverdale boy and made him an East Sider. We currently reside on the East Side. I have 2 daughters and 4 stepchildren and 11 grandkids, so we're busy with that. None of them in Des Moines, though, so we get to travel to see them. I got involved in all of these, I guess would say politics, basically as the East High PTA president. We are going out for the sales tax. I knew that all the schools needed help to get rebuilt. I was the co-chair of that campaign, and we were successful, and I think the results are very clear on what's happened to the buildings with all the renovation with the sales tax. And from that, I just going door to door in the sales tax, I saw what was going on in the neighborhoods, especially over by me. Saw the deterioration of houses, the roads, many different things. I ended up joining the East Des Moines Chamber during the renaissance of the East Village. I then decided to run for school board because I felt that schools were critical to the success of a community. If you have strong schools, you'd have a strong community. I served on the school board for 14 years and then decided to run for city council because I also realized that some of the decisions being made by the school or by the city were impacting schools. We had a development coming in over by where I live that would have filled a building without ever telling the school district that they were building it. So I thought we needed better communication, and I realized that having good city government would bring strength to the schools, and also by rebuilding neighborhoods would bring young people back into Des Moines. So some of the reasons I ran to begin with was strengthening neighborhoods. The other would be making sure we had good public safety, and the other was to make sure that we had the infrastructure in place to keep the city current. As you can tell, it was all I heard when we first got on was potholes. Then we also got on, and the sales tax was coming up for the city. The sales tax has enabled us to do one of the priorities I had was the infrastructure. We've put a record amount of money into infrastructure, over $400 million this year, and Bill's talked a lot about the updating the storm sewers, updating roads. The other thing is sidewalks, making this a more walkable community. We have prioritized school routes, and you've already started seeing a lot more sidewalks being built. We also said that if we're going to repair a road like Fleur, a major arterial road, there'll be sidewalks on both sides. So you'll see sidewalks now along Fleur where there were dirt paths where people would walk to the grocery stores. So again, that's another priority. The other thing was about public safety. And after what we've experienced and seeing what's going on, it was very clear that we needed to redirect how we were delivering some of our public safety. And that's where I advocated for more mental health specialists and beefing up the mental health crisis team. I found out that we didn't have a 24/7 mental health crisis team. And I felt that was critical. So I advocated for adding more police officers to be trained. Lorna Garcia was our one mental health crisis police officer, and she does a phenomenal job. We now have one more that has joined her, and hopefully 2 more. And then they've added more mental health specialists that will go out and deal with the people when they're called for a mental health issue. They're talking about and looking for someone to go into the mental health, as a mental health specialist, into the 911 call center. So when a call comes in, they can divert the mental health crisis team. We also added 4 mental health specialists for adolescents. Again, dealing with adolescents is different than adults. So trying to go forward to help the people where they're at and not get them into the incarceration. We're also have added working with.
And that's time.
That was quick.
It's funny how that works. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Thank you for sharing a little bit about what makes your hearts beat. We appreciate it. I have a couple of questions that have been submitted by our neighbors, and I'd just like your thoughts on these. So I think what we'll do is I'll ask a question, and we'll give you maybe 90 seconds to answer it. Sound fair? Okay. The first question, we've heard a lot about infrastructure this evening so far. Our nation's deteriorating infrastructure has been front and center also with the president's agenda and that kind of stuff going on. What do you see as the greatest infrastructure needs in our community going forward, and how will you endeavor to address them? We'll start over here with Connie this time.
Well, there's various infrastructure design. You can say roads and all of those kind of things, but I think infrastructure in a neighborhood is rebuilding the neighborhood and providing the housing. Like 15 years, 5 years. So to me, it still ties back to housing, making sure that we have the opportunity to rebuild in the neighborhood.
Connie, I'm going to ask you, is the switch on your microphone up or down?
It is down.
It needs to be up
Sorry.
to be on. So do you want to say that again?
Okay, real quick. I tie it to housing because I think that one thing we found is we had over 1,000 blighted houses throughout this community, and they were taking down about 10 a year. So now they're taking down hundreds. And what that does is open up the opportunity to rebuild in the neighborhoods. And I know that I saw a man on 23rd Street when I was running. He said, "Why should I keep my house up?" There were 2 houses down from him that were boarded up, had been empty for like 5-10 years. And he's right, so I think it really helps improve the neighborhood, but it takes the dollars from the city to help tear these things down, and we were able to do that with our sales tax money. We moved it up considerably. The other thing is in our money that we put into Invest ESM. It's a program that we started with Polk County, has been a great partner, and we're going in and rebuilding homes and giving forgivable loans and even extra money if you want to fix up your home. We had block challenge grants that we gave out to those 4 neighborhoods that were so successful that we opened it up for the whole city. You could get up to $2,500 of a matching grant to make improvements into your home on the front facade. And it not only did it make improvements to homes, but it also created great neighborhood camaraderie. You have to work, 5 to 10 of your neighbors have to work together to get that financing. So again, strengthening, not only getting our neighborhoods stronger just by the fact that we're all working together, but also by making the infrastructure, the investments that it takes we're an old city and it takes more effort and it takes more strategies on how we're going to invest and move things, keep it going.
And that's time. Thank you. Mr. Lewis, would you like to? Okay.
So infrastructure, well, I still believe time and time again water is infrastructure. And if you haven't had the opportunity to go through Des Moines Waterworks University, I would highly suggest that everyone in this room do so, because you'll then learn how pivotal that resource is to our existence here in Des Moines. If you're not familiar, this isn't an issue that's just central Iowa. It actually goes to the tip of Iowa. Iowa's still operating off of a 100-year-old drainage and tiling law. We love farmers. I'm always going to support farmers. I went to an agricultural school. They needed water off their land, so they would tile it out, and that water would go to their drain and immediately go to our spillways. But in some of those practices, from spreading manure and the increased usage of nitrates and fertilizers, that drainage doesn't actually soak up. Well, how it works is soil naturally captures our nitrates. Soil naturally captures the manure that's spread out. But when you put a tile that's about 2 to 3 feet under the ground, it captures those nitrates. It captures the bacteria that's in the manure, and it runs into our spillways. So there are common practices that are being implemented to slow down some of that nitrate and manure that's getting in there, whether that's buffer zones, saturated buffer zones, and so forth. But we have to work upstream with farmers and counties to make sure the water coming down to us is clean, and we can address that immediately. If not, Des Moines could very well become obsolete or too expensive to live in.
And that's time. Thank you. Let's start on the right with Mr. Gray.
Thank you. Of course, city infrastructure is one of my biggest focus. To give you an idea, it is also the sewers as well as the streets. In sewers, we have spent about $21 million in sewer separation. The old sewers we had down in King Irving and River Bend were combination sewers that, when they overflowed, went right in the Des Moines River. The DNR kind of put the kibosh on that and said, you're going to have to straighten this out. So I think by the end of next year, we will have almost all the sewers separated, so you have water, stormwater in one, sanitary sewer in the other. That's another big point. Second thing is also, you have to look at the streets. How are we doing it? To put in perspective, down here on Lower Beaver and Brinkwood, I have gotten so many calls from people speeding and coming around those corners, and it's unsafe for anybody. If you're out there walking, it's not a good thing to see. So I'm working with our traffic and transportation department. We're going to put some barriers in there. We're going to try and slow the traffic down and make it safe. Same thing over here in Madison, just off Lower Beaver. A lot of complaints about that. How are we going to take care of that? We're going to have to put some traffic signals in that work. We have to put some traffic islands in that's going to slow that traffic down, and we got to get that thing done and done right. Also down here in MLK, right before you take the turn up to go past the Tie Dom Village. I don't know how many cars ended up in the Tie Dom Village because they don't make that corner.
And that's
we
time.
We have to keep working on that. And then the big one.
That's time, Mr. Gray.
90 seconds? Are you?
90 seconds. That's what it is. I think we could all talk for a while on things like this, so, okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so when we're talking about infrastructure, I have 3 things that I want to talk about. The first one is flooding. We've talked about that a little bit today, but what I noticed in Mr. Gray's opening was that most, if not all, those projects were focused in Beaverdale that were dealing with the flooding. And I was recently at a community meeting that was around Myrtle Hay and Urbandale, which floods constantly. And Connie was there, Bill was not, but there were a lot of neighbors there who said, I dealt with flooding, and both of our city representatives who were there confirmed that they knew about the areas that had been flooded in 2018 and, in 2008 and years before, because there's flooding happening all the time. It's not like this is a new thing. And they were like, well, the neighbors need to work together to bring this to our attention, even though we know about it, so that we can start allocating money to those areas. And I don't think that that's a good way to deal with things. I think that this is a huge issue and we need to take care of all of it all at the same time so that nobody is dealing with this the next time it floods, because we know it's going to be happening more often. The next thing I wanted to talk about was transportation. I think that we need to be very, very aggressively moving from a car-dependent city to a public transportation city. So I'm going to beat you to it, sorry. I think that I know that we have, I think, is it 12 parking spots for every resident in Des Moines, something like that? Way too many parking spots per resident in Des Moines, and we need to be going away from that. That's going to help our streets, and it's also going to help our city just be, breathe into walkability and things like that. Breathe into revitalization without gentrification.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
They stole my thunder. Safe streets is a big important thing for me because it's already been talked about and water's already been talked about. Um, the discussion about infrastructure has been changing a lot recently. You know, childcare is an important component of infrastructure, but I think in the city of Des Moines, one of the elements of infrastructure that we need to pay more attention to is the data collection and our data infrastructure, because that's going to help build transparency and trust in our city. So whether it's just collecting police data on all stops so that we understand how police policies and practices are being done, and where issues are created by those practices, I think that's an important piece of infrastructure that we need to pay attention to. The other element of that is what I mentioned about our budget. Having the data on how our projects and programs and initiatives are performing will help us move in the direction that we want. We'll be able to keep tracking towards our goals, making sure that our city is equitable and safe and sustainable. And we need that data to be able to say, we're using your dollars, your tax dollars, effectively, efficiently, and we're going to have the outcomes that we said we were going to have.
2 seconds left.
Transportation, there you go.
Very well done. Very well done. I think we have time for one more question. And this is a question that has been somewhat addressed a little bit, I think. But I would like to hear a little bit more about how our community can better support safety and prosperity for all of its residents, regardless of their color or language or ethnicity. Would you take 90 seconds, and I know that's not nearly enough time for this, but just give us some big picture ideas what you would like to see. And we started on the right that time, so let's start on the left this time. Sound good?
Indira, do you want to start this one?
So how can we be more equitable as a city? How can we keep our communities safe? That starts with making sure that we have the basic resources that we need. We have a wonderful diversity here in Ward 1 and in the Lower Beaver neighborhood as well, which I think some people might be surprised by, but there is wonderful diversity here. And we need to be making sure that we are not criminalizing people in their own neighborhoods. And so that means building up public safety systems that are born from the community. That means removing police interaction with people that they have historically harmed, in really horrifying ways, which we've seen more and more in the public eye recently. And so that really just means really getting people the resources they need. That means basic needs resources, housing, food, everything that people need to live. But it also means making sure that we have community resources, places for people to go, so that there's not just nothing to do, right? Making sure that we have community spaces and making sure that we have community groups that are building up that safety. We need to stop criminalizing houselessness in our communities, and we need to stop criminalizing people working together to feed their communities. There's been an attack on the community fridges recently, which are emptying every single day very quickly. And I don't see why the city is involved in tearing those sorts of things down. I don't see why the city is involved in sending police officers and bulldozers to houseless encampments when they have nowhere else to go and the resources just aren't
And that's
there.
time.
So that's my stance on that.
Okay. Well, you deferred. Now you can.
No, I'll just come back to me. That's fine. One of the things that I think about a lot is are we having the right conversations, and are we having conversations that are effective? And I think that when you look at some of the city programs that are available in our city right now, the information is not getting disseminated to everyone. We have the wonderful block grant program that was mentioned that came out of Invest DSM is meant to be a citywide program, but because of a lack of communication and a lack of the networks that we have, due to some difficulties of neighborhood associations, we're not getting the coverage that we should have for those programs. One of the programs that has been successful is the Rain Garden program, which has had overwhelming support because I think everyone in the city wants to have a rain garden in their yard. It's a beautiful piece of infrastructure that residents can have and help get funded by the city. But until we start communicating that resources are available and making an effort to go door to door and say, hi, my name is Marcus, I would like to help you put a rain garden in your yard or do rain barrels, or what do you need from the city? Until we have those conversations, I don't think we're gonna see dramatic change that we need to be equitable and prosperous for everyone. Thank you. It's okay. I try to be concise. So.
Wow, okay. Mr. Gray, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I have been doing for the past 8 years has been going to the neighborhood meetings. I hit as many as I possibly can. I get feedback from the residents there, tell me what's going on in the neighborhood, what isn't right, what do I need to take back to the city council and make things work. And I bring back any information that I have. That two-way conversation goes a long way. You're going to find out if you're not making your goals and your visions very quickly.
No, but do you have a question?
I'll give you an example. We have a subgroup that we meet with monthly at the River Bend Neighborhood Association. One thing I have found out is that, you know, there's a lot of mentally ill people in our city. And River Bend will tell you that they have a high concentration of it. Connie sits in on that same call with me. And, you know, it makes a lot of sense when you have to get a specialist in mental health, that if you send a policeman in full dress uniform and a sidearm to go talk to somebody that's either suicidal or already done enough damage, it's not going to get the job done. It's going to push them over the edge. How can we change our policing to match something like that? We're working hard on getting that done. Another good point is, you know, we get a lot of public intox in that area too. You know, you can't arrest your way out of that stuff. What you have to do is take a look and say, can we put a sobriety center, hopefully over at Broadlines?
And that's time. Finish your sentence.
All right. If we can offer you a sobriety center as opposed to going to jail, we've made a mark on our community and give these people a chance to move forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's go back to Mr. Lewis.
Awesome. So I'm very I'm very candid with this conversation because there's been some things that me and my family have experienced as African Americans in Iowa and in America. I'm going to start with a quick story, but my brother was arrested downtown Des Moines for jaywalking. That following weekend, I went down there, and I saw two white males throwing a football in the middle of the street. And the police stopped them and said, get out the street, stop messing around. They were extended grace that day. They weren't arrested. They weren't given a record, but my brother now has to pay a fine. That's not justice. That's not what equity is, and I know Iowa and Des Moines can do better. The first thing that I want to start doing is making sure that our officers live in Des Moines. They don't come from the suburbs, and they can see the impact that they will have and what they will affect if arresting John, knowing very well John's mother is homeless or hungry or working 3 jobs. The next thing I want to see also is a citizen, or actually, resident review board, where the community can give their statements on what this impact, what does this body camera footage looks like, how is this going to affect the community, and how can we restore the trust? And third, we got to get rid of bad apples, period. We wouldn't allow that to take place on a football team if there was a weak link who was tearing the team down. If we want law enforcement to have this persona where everyone feels safe calling them, we have to get rid of bad actors, period.
And that's time. Thank you.
Sorry.
Ms. Bozen.
I think that Des Moines is taking a more active role in understanding equity. We have in place an equity coordinator that's in the city manager's office, and Manisha is looking at all the policies. So it goes through her, anything that we are being brought to us, to start with an equity lens and look at everything we do. We did pass the ban on racial profiling. Along with that came the Public Policy and Review Committee that's reviewing all the policies of the place and then the practices. And we also posted online all of the policies of the place that had never been there before. I think we need to continue with our civil and human rights, Bridging the Gap program. They had great conversations, and out of that came good housing, safety, equity throughout all the programs. We need to look at a more diverse workforce. We need to make sure our, whether it's any of our public safety or even our city employees, represent and look like the citizens that are in our community. The diversity that's come into Des Moines has been fabulous. It's brought new opportunities, new businesses, and I think we need to highlight that and even encourage more opportunities for people if they're starting to do business. How do we get them to, if you're a small business owner, what is the system that we have in place that gets you from beginning to end and not put any obstacles in the way through our permitting or different obstacles that we hear about?
Thank you, thank you, thank you so very much. I know that at least one of you has a time commitment coming up here very shortly, and so I'm going to thank you at this point for your time this evening and invite you, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to do so, and I'm sure that others have questions that they would like to ask as well. But thank you so much. We're going to take a few moments and reset for the school board. Thank you. Are we about ready to start? We good? And just to make sure everybody knows, the microphones have a switch on them. Make sure that you know which way is on and which way is off. Okay? Excellent. So just like we did with the city council, we're going to give you each 5 minutes to introduce yourself, share with us the issues that you think are facing Des Moines Public Schools, and how you would address them if elected to the school board. So why don't we start? I think we started over here. I think we'll start over here this time on the right. Sound good? Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Schooster. I'm running for Des Moines Public School Board in District 1 because we need leaders who listen to constituents before they act. I am a mom of 4 kids, all in DMPS. My 3 daughters go to Windsor Elementary, and my son goes across the street at Woodlawn. They are my motivation behind everything I do. I was really worried about them going to school in the fall during a global pandemic. And I reached out to school board members, including the director in District 1. And I didn't feel like my concerns were being heard at all. We deserve leaders who listen, who prioritize the safety of our children, our teachers, and our staff, regardless of partisan politics at the State House. Another reason I'm running for school board in District 1 is because last year, I learned that my 2nd grade daughter could not read. And I found out during virtual learning. When my daughter started becoming a statistic for our school district, I knew then that I was going to be part of the change. Less than half of our district's 1st and 2nd grade students know how to read. Less than half. And barely half of our 3rd graders know how to read. Research shows that if a child can't read at grade level by 4th grade, they are 4 times less likely to graduate on time, if at all. We should all be concerned about our literacy crisis. I have spent the better part of the past 2 years trying to figure out how we solve this. Our district and our board has set goals to address this, and there's no real plan. I've talked to teachers, and teachers have told me we do not have the support that we need. We don't have enough planning time. We don't have enough training. The solutions are in front of us. And once again, we need leaders on our school board who are willing to listen. That's why I'm running for Des Moines Public School Board in District 1. I will listen. I will lead with integrity, transparency, and accountability. And I hope I can earn your vote on November 2nd.
Do you want me to just let it keep counting? You got like 2 minutes left.
I should mention my previous career before I was a mom was a news reporter. So it doesn't surprise me that I still have 2 minutes left because every time I had to tell a story, it was 2 minutes long.
Okay, why don't we just move from right to left, shall we?
All right. Can everyone hear me? Is my mic on? Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Martirano, and I am your District 1 school board member. And thank you for hosting this evening, and thank you for having us here, and thank you to all of you who are engaged in the process. I appreciate it. I moved here to Des Moines 7 years ago, and to work for DMPS. And now I currently work for Johnston Community School District. I run their student information system, create data analytics and Tableau visualizations, as well as assist with state reporting. I've been in education my entire career. I started as an industrial technology teacher at the high school level and have had a passion for education my entire life. It's been quite a year here on the board, as well as, of course, everywhere in the world, particularly with the pandemic. And the board has still managed to accomplish a great deal, including creating new policies that are directly aligned with our math and literacy goals. These new policies are going to ensure that we are moving the needle where we need to be moving for our student achievement and our teaching and learning. I've also become a certified student outcomes-focused governance coach, and that process has afforded me the opportunity to really gain a deep understanding of governance, as well as learn more about improving student achievement overall. I've served on the Community Legislative Action Team and have advocated at the State House for improved funding for public education. I've also collaborated with neighboring districts, not only just here in the metro, but also in rural Iowa. We are not going to get our legislators to properly fund education if we don't look beyond the metro area. We've got to get our legislators in the rural area on board as well. My focus, when reelected, is going to be continuing to improve the opportunities that students have and the rigor that we focus on in order to move our students' achievement forward, particularly in our literacy and math goals that the board has set forth. I will also focus on improved equity in the district and really highlight the need to focus on our anti-racist systems at DMPS. Another focus that I will have is going to be representing the vision and the values of the community with a collaborative approach to communication, looking at all stakeholders across District 1, students, parents, teachers, staff, community members, and representing the entire district as a whole, having conversations with all of our constituents and representing the district as a whole, not just a few families, but really everyone. So it's not easy work. I am committed to continuing to learn, investing the time, investing really the energy in being in schools, having conversations, asking the superintendent the tough questions about what's the reality that's happening in our schools, and if something's not working, ensuring that we're holding him accountable to make decisions and make adjustments so that we are moving in the right direction. So thank you again for being here. I hope to earn your vote on November 2nd.
Well, thank you. Should we just keep moving that way?
Sure. I'm Jackie Norris. I am running for school board for the at-large seat. So the three of us are running. There's 2 open seats for at-large. I'm running because I believe that public education is fundamental to every child, and every child deserves access to a high-quality school regardless of their zip code. And this is really high-stakes work. And I can think of no greater honor than to be able to advocate and fight every day for our young people. And it's high stakes work, and it doesn't just need me, it needs all of us if we're going to continue to have great public schools in Des Moines. So just a little bit about me. I currently own a small business, and it's called State Public Policy Group, and we spend a lot of time bringing groups together to form sound public policy that works for individuals to build coalitions, to create groups and make sure that they're communicating effectively. A lot of it is bringing voices together, often voices that aren't typically invited to the table. Among other things I've had the honor of doing in my life, I have been the chief of staff to First Lady Michelle Obama. And one of the things I'm most proud of there was elevating the issue of childhood obesity and making sure that there was an honest conversation and policy that followed to ensure that more children had access to healthy foods and exercise. I've been the CEO of Goodwill of Central Iowa, and one of the things I'm most proud of there, in addition to a Ban the Box move that we did at Goodwill, is making sure that individuals have training pathways into competitive employment. Not everybody has the skills to succeed. Maybe they have a disability. Maybe they're coming out of the criminal justice system. But what they do need is an opportunity to be trained and find a competitive wage in the workforce. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and they are all in Des Moines Public Schools, 2 seniors and a sophomore. I'm the daughter of a school nurse and a high school teacher of 33 years and an active parent volunteer. I'm also somebody that's been active in politics for about 20 years, and I'm not afraid to get feisty. I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to go into the community and ask the community for help. And I think that is a very important thing that we need to continue to say over and over again, which is if we want the Des Moines Public Schools to succeed, we need everybody pitching in. We need partnerships with the city government. We need partnerships with Polk County. We need partnerships with our largest companies. We need partnerships with the nonprofits. We can't do this alone. And so my mindset as I think about what I'll bring to the school board is that of turning to the community and asking for help, because the Des Moines Public Schools needs all the help it can get for our students to be successful. The last thing I'll say is, the role of a school board, as I've been told, and like Dick Murphy's here, he may be able to tell me better than what I've learned, is to represent the vision and values of the whole community. And I intentionally chose to run at large because I think it's really important that when you make decisions, you think about decisions in the context of the whole community. And I'm excited about that. I think it's hard. I think it will be difficult, but it's the best way to think across the community and make sure that we're thinking through all of the students' needs. My job is to represent your vision and your values and hold the superintendent and the school system accountable for student outcomes. So part of my job is coming out and listening, coming out and showing up at neighborhood association meetings. It's showing up in schools and asking students and teachers and staff what's going on. It's asking property tax payers what they think of the public schools. And that's what you can expect from me should I be elected to the school board.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Alonso, and it really surprises me to be here. I'm not supposed to be here because I am a woman of color, child of immigrant parents, child of migrant farm workers, and a child of a father who was very, very strict. A father who would not allow, who believed in education, but didn't want to allow his daughter to go to school because I was going to become too American. Now, I think of why I'm doing this, and it seems like when I've said it, the times that I've said it, it hasn't felt right. Like I have felt like I'm supposed to rehearse these things so that I can come across convincing and I can speak so that I can speak with conviction. And rehearsing hasn't really helped me. So here's my story. I'm the child of immigrant parents. I've been in this country since 1986. I came to Iowa because of detasseling. I grew up in Texas, traveled to New York, to Colorado, and ended up in eastern Iowa, in Lone Tree, and eventually in Muscatine, Iowa, which is where I graduated from high school, which is where I connected so well, or a teacher, Ms. Beth Hetzler, connected with me so well and saw that this Mexican young woman had potential and believed in that young woman and encouraged her. And so I graduated eventually. I went to a community college there in Muscatine, Iowa. I got married, and then I went to Iowa State. I received public education. Now, coming to this country, I was taught by my grandparents that if you wanted to go, be somewhere, do something, be someone, you had to go to school and you could not get married. And I went to school. I went to school because that to me was the only way. Now, had it not been for public education, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I believe that public education has been a gift to me. I am here because I have learned to appreciate every single thing that I have had in my life, because I have had to work for things. I didn't have a car graduating from high school. I didn't have my family attend my graduation from community college. I ran away from home because of my father not believing that I really deserved much. And so, you know, I think of my community and I think of the struggles. And for the last 22 years, I've been working at Polk County as a counselor. I eventually went to, after Iowa State, I went to Drake University, and I have a master's in counseling. I've been with the county for 22 years as a counselor, working with crime victims, sexual assault, homicide, even suicide, even though it's not a crime, robbery. And I've also worked with victims of domestic violence. So I have been with families. I've been with the community in the trenches. I've been doing the work in the trenches. I've also, for the last 9 years, worked and actually co-founded, coordinated a community soccer program that we utilize to engage families, Latino families, with a hope that we would be able to create community, which is something that we've achieved. Now, so why am I here? Why do I want to do this? I want to do this because I am a parent. All my children have attended or attend Des Moines schools. I have a child who just graduated. My 18-year-old just graduated this year. Javi is his name. I'm also your neighbor. I live on 42nd and Madison. The second house that has a lot of work going on right now, it's not looking so great, just FYI. But I've been here. I've been in this neighborhood since 2000.
And that's time.
I should be given more time because English is my second language and I can't speak as well. But I will respect that. So if anybody has questions, it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be with you.
For the record, your second language is better than my first. Yes, sir. Make sure your mic is on.
A lot of people have told me in my life English wasn't my first language either, so don't feel bad. Let me get this off for 1 second. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lloyd Elam. I was born and raised in Iowa South. Most of you may know it as Mississippi. I was born there, and like all unique stories, mine didn't start with me. It started with my mother. My mother was born in 1935 in Northeast Mississippi. She wasn't treated too well in some ways, and she worked in people's homes, and education was not something that was availed to her. But she worked in these houses, and she would ask people all the time, how's it these women she worked for? She says, what does your husband do for a living? Well, how did he get there? And eventually she snooped around enough, and she realized that they went to high school, they went to college, they got an education, they got specialized degrees. So that was her vision for all 8 of her children. So she told us, go to school, respect your teacher, sit down, be humble, ask for help. Out of the 8, 5 of her kids went on to have a college degree. One of them, her son, the youngest one, got an MBA. I believe fundamentally that there's only 2 fundamental reasons why we should have schools. Number 1, we expose our children to a myriad of different people and things and concepts of the world so that they learn how to interact and learn how to discuss and listen and talk to someone and resolve conflicts without it becoming very cantankerous, so that when they go out into the real world, they know how to do that within the confines of the rule of law and be good citizens. The other reason is so that they acquire the technical skills so they can go out and compete in the global economy in today's world, right? So they can actually go out and leverage for higher wages and real benefits. If you will all agree with me, I think we can all agree on one thing. There's too much noise in the public school system today. And I'm running to try to get all of it out. Because basically schools were made for reading, writing, reasoning, right, and math. And that's what we got to get back to. Because if everyone is educated, then everyone really does have equity. It all begins there. You can have all the government programs you want to, but if people have an education, then they're receiving equity, and we got to make sure that happens. Now, there are two sides of this coin that I think I want to discuss very briefly with you before my 5 minutes is up. I think on one side of it, we've got to learn in this global world, very diverse world that we live in, how to communicate with each other. That means that we've got to learn how to make sure that our children go to school and that we don't make sure we pit our children against one another. We're the most diverse people right now ever in our lifetime. The second thing is we've got to demonstrate to a weary public who's concerned about all the noise in the school system that the public school is still the best choice. Here's how I think we do that very quickly. Number one, I think we've got to once again reinforce the notion of having good, safe schools. We've got to start by making sure that our children are safe, both navigate through this virus until we get everybody vaccinated and get us where we need to be. But also we need to make sure that our children are free of bullying. No kid should have to come to school every day and worry about fight or flight. They should come to school with the freedom to think about how they can use their scholastic ability and really grow and imagine who they can be and what they can be. And we owe that to every child. The second thing we need to do is we need to make sure fundamentally, right, that we don't cheat our children with low expectations, that we raise the bar for them. We really challenge them to see where they can go and what they can be. Now, everybody may not make those goals, but we need to find out so that when a kid comes out of our school system, they have a brand, that they come from the Des Moines public school system, and out of that school system, we know that there is a baseline of skills they have and that they compete with anybody because they are in a competition not only with kids in Des Moines, not only with kids in Iowa, not in the United States, but children all across the world. The other thing, the way we reinforce that is with smaller class sizes. I want to tell you a little bit about class size. I believe you can do this realistically by reducing the average class size by 2 people a year over a 5-year period. Then, after that, we want to make sure that our children don't float. Recently, I talked to a teacher in the school system who said 76% of our kids did not complete community college, did not complete college, was not in the military, was not working. So we need to make sure all our children starting about their junior year, they have a plan, either to go to community college, the military, or go to workforce. Speaking of workforce, I want to make sure that we expand our vocational system to make sure that our kids are prepared starting in the 9th grade, that they will work basically at the community center, have in-class instruction and out-class instruction to get the skills they need to compete.
Thank you. As we did with the City Council, I have a number of questions that have been submitted by our neighbors and would like to pose them to you. I think we'll basically do the same thing that we did with the City Council, and that was give you about 90 seconds to respond to each one. Sound fair?
No.
No?
I'm kidding.
I maintain your second language, my first language, so, okay. Here we go. The first question is this. Des Moines Public Schools has been on the leading edge of our city's rapid diversification. What is one thing you believe DMPS is doing well in its response to this increased diversity? And as a school board member, how would you improve DMPS's response to this increased diversity? Let's start with Mr. Elam on the left.
Thank you. I think they do a very good job of recognizing the diversity. That's the first and most important thing. What we can do, there's a lot of talk about equity and inclusion, but getting back to my points is that I think that the most important thing we can do is ensure that every child, regardless of where they come from, they're probably gonna, a lot of them won't have English as a first language. So I think the one thing we can do is make sure that our ESL classes are strong, but also to make sure that we have a system in place with smaller class sizes and a way forward so that those kids, regardless of where they start, they all have an opportunity to get to a really safe place, to have whatever they want. This country is rich enough, strong enough, powerful enough for everyone to experience all the fullness that is in it and have the skills to go. We want to give them the skills to achieve all of that.
He didn't even take his whole minute. Wow. Okay, let's just move left to right, shall we?
2 minutes.
90 seconds.
The reasons that I am in Des Moines is because of the diversity. One of the reasons that I have refused to leave Des Moines Public Schools is because of its diversity. I believe that it's the best district. And I believe that it's done a really good job of acknowledging the presence of the various communities that we have here. I believe that one of the things that could change, that we could do better, is connecting families to the schools. Many families come with different beliefs, practices, and don't always have a voice in our school system, in our education system. And I say this because of the work that I do, that I have done through Polk County and through our community soccer program. We have families that are rich in ideas, and families that want to be part of the education of their children. But those pathways have not been created. We communicate with families through a paper or a computer. And families don't always have that access. Families have the desire, but don't always have that access. And I believe, we'll continue to believe. Wait, that was 30 seconds more, right?
Unfortunately, that is time.
So I think we are lucky to live in Des Moines and to have Des Moines Public Schools leaders be vocal about and celebrate the diversity that we have in our student population, and to call it out to, I think this was a couple of years ago when Rob Barron and kind of went on record supporting the Dreamers and making sure that every kid in our school district felt safe and did not feel scared when there was a lot of discussion about raids and things that would really cause students to be fearful about leaving their homes. Our diversity is our superpower, but the problem is the way I think we talk about it. When we talk about all of these people coming from all around the world, we talk about it as a challenge. And I look at it and say, oh my goodness, what an opportunity. If my child is allowed to learn from somebody who came from Mexico or somebody who came from Ethiopia, and they can learn from each other, man, if we can nail that, who wouldn't want to go to the Des Moines Public Schools? Because that is so powerful. And so I am so proud that Des Moines is very comfortable embracing our diversity and isn't afraid to stand up and speak up. But I think there's a lot more work to do past the rhetoric.
Thank you, thank you.
DMPS has done an excellent job of really celebrating the diversity in the district, as well as welcoming diversity, particularly our refugee population. And we are welcoming in new refugees as we speak to DMPS. I feel extremely proud of some of the new curriculums that have been implemented and the cultural proficiency that was a requirement before we purchased these and implemented these new curriculums. They are the thing that our diverse population needs in order to see themselves in the work. Additionally, like Jackie said, there's data that shows that we learn best when we're learning in a community, when we're learning together. And DMPS is focusing on project-based learning and having that collaborative approach to learning. And the instructional coaches are currently working on practices, strategies, and implementing new ways of teaching so that students have more opportunity to learn from each other, grow from each other, and really have an opportunity to, like Jackie said, to collaborate around the work. And I've seen it working in our classrooms, and it's really exciting and invigorating to watch because students are excited about it too. And I'm really proud of it, and will continue to advocate for appropriate curriculum, culturally responsive curriculum, and project-based learning.
I'm Shelley Schuster, again running for Des Moines Public School Board in District 1. The fact that we're talking about diversity and inclusion means that we are not doing enough. When we are doing enough, we won't need to talk about it. First, we need to start with hiring diverse teachers and staff. If you look at our student population and you look at our teachers and staff, they do not mirror each other. Second, we need to seriously reconsider standardized testing, because our students who learn English as a second language, or they're English language learners, are disproportionately at a disadvantage with standardized testing. We can implement new strategies, new curriculum, but when our teachers and staff do not reflect our student body, then we are not walking this out. This means we need to recruit teachers and staff from outside of Iowa. We need to stop recruiting solely from Iowa State universities. And we need to be inclusive. We can't just say we're inclusive. We can't just say we're celebrating our differences.
And that's
we
time.
need to actually do it.
Thank you. A second question. Last year, Des Moines Public Schools removed school resource officers from its buildings. Some of our neighbors are concerned about safety for students. There's been discussion about whether or not that should be reinstated, that kind of a thing. I am curious if you would reinstate the school resource officer program, or how you would improve safety for students in general. We'll start on the right and go left this time.
Again, I'm Shelley Schuster, running for Des Moines Public School Board in District 1. I strongly oppose having police officers criminalize our children in public school. I believe that we must follow the lead of our students. They led the initiative to remove student or school resource officers out of our buildings. If you look at any of my family pictures, I have 2 black children and 2 white children. I have seen with my own eyes how differently my children are treated. It would take a whole lot of convincing. Now, I will listen because I know what it feels like to not be heard by my school board director in District 1. So I will listen. It would take a lot of convincing and data to show me that there are not alternatives to help students feel safe at school. We need to seriously reconsider how we're investing in our counselors and psychologists and mental health professionals in our schools. I have talked with multiple counselors and psychologists who are stretched across bouncing between multiple different schools. And they are overworked, stretched thin. We need to empower them in our schools and have more of them. Because the bottom line is that when a child has misbehavior, there's something else going on. We do not need to criminalize our children in our school buildings.
Thank you.
I believe that we need to keep our children safe in our buildings, and that the newly implemented restorative justice positions are very positive. And I've witnessed restorative justice circles happening in our buildings, and I think that it is the right work. I think that looking at that foundational issue, like Shelley said, Behaviors are representative of needs that are not being met. We need to continue to look at the needs that are not being met of our students and focus on providing resources to address those unmet needs. I don't believe that officers in our buildings are the answer to assisting those students or assisting in keeping our buildings safe. I think that the current structures that we have implemented in the last year is the right work. I think that we need to continue to monitor and make sure and be agile as we implement these new systems to ensure that we are focused on the safety of our students and the mental health of our students in combination. I would not recommend re-implementing SROs. I would recommend a constant evaluation of the work and making sure that we have the right training for the individuals that are implementing this new work.
And it's time. Thank you.
So I support the decision. I think the school board listened to students and parents, and it wasn't working. And so when something's not working and you hear that loud and clear, you have to come up with an alternative solution. And I think the restorative justice coordinators are the solution that DMPS is employing. I think, to Kim's point, it's really important to pay attention and make sure it's working, and to look at the data and make sure that it is addressing the issues that were elevated. I think that at the same time, what we also have to factor in is that we have teachers who continuously bring up their concerns about safety. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't. I think the restorative justice employees are a great step. I think at the same time, we've got to continue to hear what our teachers are saying, because I think they want to make sure that they're in a setting where they feel safe and where kids feel safe so they can learn. So again, just continuous evaluation of how it's going. And the only other thing I'd say is, and this is slightly disconnected, but I just have to plug in for the more resources that we can put to after-school programming, whether it's sports, it's activities, it's other ways for young people to have pathways and have something to do, having a trusted individual in their life, whether it's a coach, it's a teacher, it's a mentor, all of those things are helpful as well.
And that's time. Thank you.
Just as everyone has said, when the very first time that I heard this question, I actually went to my kids. So I have 3 children. I have 3 brown children, and they didn't hesitate when I said, "What do you think about officers being removed from the schools?" And they said, "Finally." And I said, "Well, tell me more." And they said, "You can't really concentrate with, when you know that there are guns in the school." And, a lot of people might think differently. I have police officers that are friends of mine that I love dearly, but I don't think that we need officers. I don't think that we need enforcement in our schools. I believe that our children need support, and I believe that they need resources. And I think that that is an easy way of trying to take care of underlying issues when we, place a police officer in the school. I think that the hard work needs to be done. We need to look at what it is exactly that helps kids learn, grow, feel safe, and be successful.
You start my time now. I'm going to differ a little bit with everyone up here on the stage. I talked to a public defender who's African American. I've talked to 2 African American teachers, and they differ. They thought that you should have SROs, and I do too. And I tell you why. I think that there are things going on in our world today that's very scary, and we need to make sure from the external threats coming to our schools, we see it all the time, we need to make sure we keep our kids safe. I think we should mend the program, not end it, to create win-win scenarios, but I think that we should never concede control of the classroom to the teacher, but we should make sure that we have a system where our kids understand how to operate, as I said earlier, under the rule of law, because no employer is going to let you come in, right? The schools is different today than it was 20 years ago. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we need to make sure, even for our kids, just recently I talked to someone who asked me about a transgender student. And I told them it's not the public school's business to tell people about their sexuality. But if you have young girls going into a school, someone may have a different agenda, and they can go in and, impose serious harm. So I think we need to make sure we have a system like that in place to make sure that everyone is safe, but we can create win-win scenarios for everybody and make sure that our children actually learn again how to operate under the rule of law in a normal society so that we have social stability. That's important, and we don't see a lot of that today.
Thank you. Our third question tonight is this. You've heard of this little pandemic thing that we've had going on? What do you see as the long-term impact of COVID-19 on the methods of Des Moines Public Schools? In other words, how will education be indelibly changed by the COVID-19 pandemic? Let's start left and go right this time.
Well, I think that the most profound thing that we're going to see is that there's going to be gap in achievement and capabilities, because we're almost at a year and a half of having different modes by which our children are educated. That's the most important thing. So I think that we're going to have to take, as a board, additional steps to make sure that we get all our children caught up to speed. Every child doesn't have a mother and father who has a college degree, and so who went to college. So if that kid doesn't have that, and it's up to them, and they're not going to school every day, then that child is going to fall invariably behind. And what that means is some of the issues that we talk about, when we talk about social justice, when we talk about eliminating social ills, when we talk about people achieving all the fullness that this country has to offer and get the skills they need, they're going to lose that. So I think we need to make education extended out through the summers and resource programs after school. But I think the thing that scares me most of all is that after COVID, and I think there are even publications that are showing it very quickly. Chalk Magazine showed something that last year they looked at all student achievement, and all students, regardless of their race, sexual orientation, families, all students fell behind. And so we need to make sure that COVID doesn't invariably create these gaps and achievement gaps, specifically with people from more affluent backgrounds and more underprivileged backgrounds. So that's the thing that keeps me up at night and scares me about this whole COVID thing, and how do we come together to make sure we fix that.
Thank you.
Would you ask the question again, slowly?
What do you see as the long-term impact of COVID-19 on the methods of Des Moines Public Schools? In other words, how will education be indelibly changed by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah. Yes, definitely the learning gap. I guess, like Lois said, I see my children struggle. I see my children. I'm speaking from my personal experience. And so I'm a single mom, and I have still 2 children that are in high school. And yes, I have a college degree, but I don't know what they're studying. When they ask me for help, do you really know what they're working on? And how, I feel inept. And I do not have the knowledge to be able to help them the way they need help. And I know that experience is very similar to the experience that other parents are having in the district. And what would help my children? What would help my children? What would help my children really would be to have support services through school. Does anybody know what tutoring is? And do you know how much tutoring costs? Tutoring is super expensive. I cannot afford tutoring, and I have a full-time job.
And that's time.
And that's time.
The sad part of this is 90 seconds is not nearly enough time to address complex issues like this. True. We acknowledge this, but it is what we have, so go ahead.
You know, Maria, I'll just play off of something you said, because I think this is a moment too when you look inward amongst the student population and try and figure out how they can help each other. You know, there are young people in the school system that could be tutoring, and that can be service, that can be work study, that can be employment at a wage. And so I think it's a really interesting idea to say, well, are we actually looking to solve the problem using our own kids? I think modalities have changed. How kids learn have changed. They all now have laptops, and so we have to understand that. I don't think anything beats face-to-face with a teacher. There's nothing better. And I would say that the thing I notice the most with my kids is their sense of connectedness to another human being who looks at them every day from top to bottom and makes sure they're still doing okay. And so in addition to some of the other things that have been talked about as it relates to learning loss, it's also just the social emotional wraparound of, are these kids connected? Do they have a sense of belonging? Do they have a sense of meaning? And those are things that are typically found in a classroom with a teacher who's able to focus on those young people. The only other thing I want to say is I'm really worried about our teachers. Our teachers are tired. They're burnt out. They worked all year, then all summer,
And that's time.
And that's time.
As the husband of a school teacher, it is a real thing, what you're talking about there. Yeah. Go ahead.
The pandemic has impacted all of us differently, and I think to try and make assumptions about how it has had the largest impact and what will I do to make it better or change it is a very difficult question. This is where my expertise comes into play. We need to listen to students, listen to teachers, and we need to look at the data. We need to be constantly looking at where those concerns lie based on tangible information. We can't make assumptions when it comes to the impact that this pandemic has had. We really need to quantify the concern with information. Again, by listening, teachers, staff, students, and then looking at the data. Is it impacting a certain population differently than the rest of the population? And we need to address those needs as they arise and as they're identified. We have to be thoughtful and strategic when we're addressing the impact of the pandemic. We can't make assumptions. We have to be constantly reviewing, analyzing, and making sure that our monitoring of the work is continuous so that we improve as an entire structure.
That's as close as you get to perfect timing.
I think there is a whole host of things I could talk about with the impact of the pandemic as a mom of 4 who all spent an entire year virtual learning. But what I hope has changed is that everyone recognizes our kids, our teachers, and our staff have to be safe at school in order to learn. And in order to make that happen, we need to have leaders on our school board who are willing to do the right thing, who are willing to listen to the people they represent more than the politicians at the State House. We can set a lot of lofty goals in our district, but if our kids aren't safe and healthy in a classroom and our leaders aren't willing to even have a discussion with constituents about how their own kids are going to be safe in a classroom, then we need to change the leaders. That's why I'm Shelley Skooster and I'm running for District 1.
I think we have time for one more question. My wife is a elementary music teacher. She sees 350 kids on Mondays, and Tuesdays there's another 200 kids, that kind of thing. Good times. My daughter is in the marching band and the concert band. My son loves drama. And my question today is, what role do you see the fine arts playing in our education system? We'll start on this end, the right end, and go to the left.
I keep repeating my name because I want people who are watching the live stream to know who's talking. So again, Shelley Scooster, running for Des Moines Public School Board in District 1. One of my children has special needs and learns differently. And one of the things that she excels at is music and art. I believe that our elementary schools in particular need to really, really empower our kids through art and music, because life isn't easy. And when we come across a challenge as we grow older, we know that we're good at music, and we know that we're artists. So we know that we have strengths when we have a strong foundation of art, music, and extracurriculars. I believe they are absolutely vital to every child in our district. And I appreciate your family's role in that.
I very much support the arts in curriculum. I believe that we can do more as a district to be creative and be innovative when it comes to perhaps co-teaching, using the arts in conjunction with math, using music and math being taught together. I've had conversations with our curriculum coordinators and some music teachers in the district about how it can be implemented, where we can use band and choir in math class to better learn math, and really engage our students in the learning in different ways. I think it is critical to provide a well-rounded experience every day at school, and that includes the arts. And I'm very much a proponent. I support the arts, am a supporter of the arts in the community, am a participator in the arts in the community, and advocate for that collaborative, innovative approach to our curriculum.
My family had the pleasure, my kids were younger, they went to DC public schools. And believe it or not, I realized just how lucky we were in Des Moines when in DC we realized that you had to fundraise to pay for a music teacher, a PE teacher, an art teacher. They didn't fund it at the District of Columbia. As I was thinking about my kids' journey, all of my kids play an instrument. It's a little bit of a joke because we tell them that they better keep playing because they'll probably have to be doing it on a street corner to pay for college. But we're actually kind of serious. But you know, the way that they first got tipped off to music was because at Coles Public School, elementary school, they rented out rooms to music teachers. And I think these music teachers, whether it was free or it was low cost, our kids had music lessons at 3, 4, 5 years old. And ever since they've been on this journey. I recognize how lucky I am that they had that opportunity. And I think what we have to do is figure out how to make access at such a young age to some of these arts programming not have financial barriers. Because that's often sometimes what happens. Because they need to supplement it outside of whatever your wife is doing with her 300 kids. And so I'm absolutely a proponent. Look, anything, we have to recognize, I have to say this because I'm really passionate about this. For some young people, their pathway to school is art, music, or sports. And if we underfund that, we are doing a disservice to young people, because they will do well in academics because they love art, or they love music, or they love sports. And so I feel really strongly that we need to continue to identify ways to fund those programs.
I'm going to speak fast so that I can get everything that I need to say in 90 seconds. One of the things on my platform is wellness, health and wellness. And, you know, when I first mentioned it, it was really soccer. I had soccer in my head because that's what I've done for 9 years with families. But I support any activity that engages children, encourages children to stay engaged. And music is one of them. So fine arts, excellent. All three of my children have played the violin. I won't say how well they play, but they have played the violin. And it becomes a coping mechanism for a lot of children. It becomes a way for them to feel like they belong. And I cannot imagine a school or a school district without that. It would be such a disservice to our youth. So I support fine arts. Yes, very much so. I did it under 30, 90, yeah, under a minute maybe.
Well, thank you all for allowing me to come here. I really enjoyed this. And I just want to say that the communication line will be open if somehow, by the good Lord's grace, I find myself taking the oath of office on the 16th of this month. I want to come back so that we can continue this conversation. Music is very important. You can't go to any school these days without kids having some earbuds in their ear, because it's a soothing mechanism, you know, like Maria was saying. I think it's important. We even know that there are statistics that show that children who listen to classical music at a very young age tend to do better in math, be able to communicate better, have better reasoning skills. I even see it with my own daughter. Sometimes I feel like she may have some stress, and she'll say, "Dad, let's listen to classical music," and it helps her to focus in. So we understand the importance of music. I think these are values questions about how much do we value the overall development of our children. I think that's the big issue here. Music, sports, you name it. And how much do we value our children? And how much are we willing to put into it to make sure that our children, when they come out of high school, they're well-rounded, they're well-prepared to be good citizens, to be productive, and to live out this example of what it means to be a great American. And that's what I have lived by, and that's what I was taught, and that's what I hope for all of our children in our Des Moines Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation this evening. Again, we would love for you to stick around and converse and chat and all that stuff. You're welcome to do that as long as people are interested. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great night.
Thank you for having us.